So I think just kind of being cognizant of that and holding all of that, all of the suffering, really, all of the difficulties of the times that we're living in, I think, as our practice invites us to do, to really kind of situate ourselves right where we are, where we are individually, but also where we are collectively, and just to hold that in our hearts and keep our hearts open to ourselves, open to others, open to everyone. It's so easy to just go into the, the us and them mentality, the right, we're right, they're wrong. And, it's absolutely appropriate to have a view about, what we think the most helpful, beneficial way forward is for the society and for the world and what needs to happen. But when we cling to those views and opinions and beliefs, then however wise the teachings and the practices are that we embody and espouse, if we get caught up in clinging, then we're just part of that cycle of reproducing the greed and the hatred and the delusion. And that cycle just goes on and on and on. So I think the challenge for us is, in the words of T.S. Eliot, teach us to care and not to care. It's the care to be, to have our hearts really engaged, really care about what happens, really care about how the elections unfold in 30 days and over these days and in the days and weeks following. Really be concerned, really be engaged, but to do that from a place of our heart being opened, not being closed, not being, clinging to our own views, our own opinions, our own beliefs, and them, the bad people, being wrong. And that's a practice, and because it's really hard. We're in the middle of it all, and we do get swept up. But what I think the practice gives us and helps us with is that we can see when we do get swept up in that, we do get caught up in us and them. I've certainly got caught up in us and them, and get caught up in my views and us being right and me being right. But what the teachings help me to do is to catch that, to be able to see, oh yeah, if I keep acting that out, then I suffer myself because I create separation. The good us versus the bad them is the typical one. And I also, what I put into the world tends to reproduce that as well. And it tends to reproduce that suffering, and just to compound it. So can we be a force or forces for kind of breaking that down, untangling that? And it's a paradox, because we care deeply, and we do see perhaps one road as at least offering real possibilities of care and compassion and wisdom, and another one offering, cruelty and division and suffering. And so it really does make a difference, and no question about it, and no wisdom in kind of papering over that. But can we hold that, if you like, as a kind of a wise insight, without at the same time getting caught up in a closed fist, the closed fist of clinging. And so that's really the kind of the theme that I want to focus on today. And it's kind of on a similar theme to what we've been exploring a lot over recent weeks and months. I've talked about the two practices of abandoning what's unskillful and cultivating the good, and kind of the hindrances that stand in the way of us being peaceful, calm, free, free of clinging. And what I want to do today, given what I'd like to do is to is to really kind of position ourselves right where we are in the midst of, I think probably almost everybody. I don't know if anyone's here from Europe. Occasionally we get folks from Europe and Latin America and Africa or Asia, but I think mostly folks here are from the US. So we're kind of in the middle of all that's going on right now with all of the challenges we face. So I really want to kind of keep us really grounded in that, but also kind of to step into the wisdom, the kind of perennial wisdom of these teachings and practices that are practices for all times and all places. We have lots of opportunities to bring awareness to anywhere and any ways in which we're suffering now, and and to bring awareness to the clinging that gives rise to the suffering, and so that we can really live with freedom in the midst of the storm. Because, for most of us, the way of dealing with the stresses and the worries and the fears of what's going on in the country right now, but also what's going on in the world that's affecting everybody in the world, the pandemic, climate change, which is kind of the big thing hanging over even above the pandemic, the changes to our world, which are really, are affecting our lives already and will even more in coming years, and not too far off, and happening now with the fires and the hurricanes and all of that, that we are living in the midst of. And one way of dealing with all these challenges is to kind of step away and go on a mountain for a few years and kind of work with whatever's coming up. And it's great if we have an opportunity to do that, but even there we're going to be in the midst of everything that's going on. There's nowhere that's outside of what we're living through right now. And so wherever we are, and particularly here, right here where we are in our lives, this is the place where we're called to kind of to work with our suffering, and how and the ways we can free ourselves from suffering. One of the wonderful things about these teachings, this path of teachings and practice, is we never have to go anywhere other than where we are to find the place to practice. It's always here, right here with us. If we're in the midst of, feeling joyful about whatever it is that might be happening, if you had a child or a grandchild, or, got a new work that you love, maybe, feeling very joyful and ebullient, then that's the place to be, to really enjoy that, to work with whatever's coming up. And if you're caught up in a lot of fear, a lot of worry, or physical pain, or whatever, this is the place to start. So the wonderful thing about this practice is not about, imagining ourselves somewhere else. It's always available right here, right now. And so the question really we can ask ourselves is, firstly, where is suffering? Where is there suffering in our lives? For many of us, if we look, excuse me, if we kind of explore and pay attention to the suffering, in our lives, we'll find it takes a form right now, perhaps, of anxiety, maybe fear, worry. How are things going to unfold over the next, 5, 6, 7 weeks, over the next 30 days and after that? A lot of fear, a lot of anxiety can come up around that, a lot of uncertainty there. We can also experience suffering in that kind of us and them that I spoke about, being angry with them, why did he do this? Why is he doing this? Why didn't he do that? Or they, so we can get caught up in anger and blame and judgment. And each of these, the expression of this is aversion, or these are all expressions of aversion: blame, judgment, anger, etc. Similarly, fear, worry, anxiety are also expressions of aversion, the kind of pushing away of experience in some way. Or we may be wanting a particular outcome. We're craving, it's got to be this. We got to have this outcome to the election. And this takes the form of craving. If it's not approached wisely and appropriately, if we're holding on to it's got to be like this, then there's craving. And when there's craving, there's suffering. Or maybe we're taking in more information than is helpful to us. We're wanting to do this because if we think, if we only know more, what are the opinion polls saying? And what about this? And what's going on in the Senate? And what all of this? And if we don't do that, if we don't take in information wisely, this can be another form of suffering. We can be overwhelmed. And this is, I think, is an expression of aversion as well. It can be an expression of delusion. We're thinking that we can, solve something by, if only we learn more, if only I know more about the situation, then I'll be safer, then things will be okay. So these are the forms that suffering takes: greed, hatred, and delusion. In terms of they manifest as craving, they manifest as aversion, the pushing away, and they manifest as delusion, kind of when we're disconnected or we're acting or thinking in unwise ways. So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about 3 lenses through which we can look at our experience. You could see these as 3 ways of looking at our experience that can lead us to suffering if we're not aware, or they can lead us to freedom if we are aware, if we are paying attention. And these 3 lenses are: first, clinging. Second, self, the self. And third, suffering. So clinging, self, and suffering. And I want to step out of the kind of the political kind of time we're in right now and take a more kind of a different example. And I want to use as an example somebody who was in a group I used to lead, met with, weekly, and I'll call him Malcolm, to protect the innocent. And he was a lovely person, and as a curmudgeonly guy in a very good way, kind of a little on the grouchy side, but very, very honest. And what was lovely about him, what is lovely about him, is he's very honest and willing to talk about his own challenges and struggles. Sometimes when we practice, we're not, some of the things we do that we get caught in, we don't want to talk too much about them because they're kind of a little embarrassing. If we're caught up with hatred for a particular political figure, and we're kind, we might think, I'm a Buddhist, or I'm a mindfulness practitioner, I shouldn't be having all this hatred towards Mr. X. And so we might be somewhat reticent about talking about it. But this Malcolm was much more willing to do it. And I just recall one situation, one kind of experience, or a number of situations, but that he shared some of his struggles. And I want to use them as a kind of an example of these 3 lenses of clinging, self, and suffering that we can get caught up in. Malcolm is a talented artist, And he wanted, like many artists, to improve his art, his craft. He wanted to get better. So he used to go to art classes with an established painter teacher, as one would. We want to get better and learn things about portraiture or, landscapes or whatever, So he would go along to a class with an established teacher. And when he came back from these classes and would meet with the group that I was leading, he'd talk about his experience in these classes. And he would speak about how the teacher would go around the class, and the teacher would say, excuse me, how the teacher would say very positive things about another student and say, oh yeah, you've really, your lines here and the way you've done this is really good. And Malcolm thought this other student's work was rubbish, so like, why is the teacher praising this other student? And then, it's, whether, it's rubbish. No, they're no good at doing this, And the teacher, so the teacher would say positive things about the fellow student, and the teacher didn't praise Malcolm's work. Malcolm had done something. Oh, I think I've done a really good job. And the teacher would like, oh, that's really nice. Go, okay, kind of pass him by. And obviously, Malcolm thought his own work was more proficient. He was a better artist than this other person. So when we talked about this in the group meeting, it was clear that he experienced unpleasant feelings. When the teacher would say, oh, that's really nice what you're doing there, and kind of more or less bypass Malcolm's paintings or drawings. I asked him what he felt. He said, I feel resentful. I feel kind of certain envy. I'm annoyed at the teacher. I'm kind of judgmental towards the teacher of like, he seems to be a good teacher, but he seems to think this person's work is really good and doesn't seem to have much good to say about my work. And so, and when we kind of explored his responses, we talked about how he was responding. He wasn't saying anything to the teacher, but he was just kind of stewing in his own, resentment and annoyance and judgment. And we explored how he might, over a period of time, over a period of weeks and months, how he might respond in ways that he would suffer less from this experience, from going to this class. Because he clearly recognized, he wasn't in denial, he recognized he was suffering. This was an unpleasant experience he was going through. It was an experience in the Pali language of dukkha, of unsatisfactoriness. Things were not the way he wanted them to be. He was experiencing suffering. And, when we talked about his experience, Malcolm was aware that his suffering came from the fact that he was wanting something. He was looking for praise. That was something he was wanting. He was disliking something else. He was disliking that praise was going to this other person who he saw as unworthy, wasn't a very good artist. And so it was experience of aversion there. And he was also judging himself for his responses. He was kind of seeing how he was responding. He didn't like it, He felt like, oh, this is so petty. Why am I so petty? Why am I so judgmental? And yet that was what he was feeling. So he was being honest about what he was feeling, but he didn't like what he was feeling. It's like, oh, I don't like who I am for responding in that way. Anyone experienced that before? You kind of have a reaction and I don't like to have this reaction. I shouldn't have this reaction. I shouldn't hate X because, I'm a Buddhist, or I'm a spiritual person, I'm a meditator or whatever. So he saw these things when we talked about it. He saw there was wanting, there was craving, there was aversion, there was judgment. And he saw that there was clinging. He saw the clinging and the suffering that came out of the clinging, that was a result of the clinging. And when we talked about it, he could also see that the wanting and the aversion and the judgment built up a sense of a separate self, a sense of a separate self. Excuse me.
Call from Kaylee Jagaraya.
This reminded me of, I was watching Nicole Wallace on Wednesday, I think, of this week in the middle of the afternoon. And she had an well-known epidemiologist on, and saying some wise things about the pandemic and about COVID. And then as he was saying these very wise things, his probably 4-year-old grandson comes in and starts making faces behind, and it was very enjoyable. It was a lot of fun to watch. So coming back to Malcolm and his situation, he saw how the wanting, the aversion, the judgment built up a sense of a separate self. There was a self that needed to be fed, need praise, needed to be protected. I don't want, somebody else to get praised, or I don't like my judgment. I need to protect myself from my own judgment. So the sense of being fed, being protected, being defended. So what was very interesting was, we explored these feelings over a number of meetings. And, as you would expect, and as you would in practice, I invited him to stay with the difficult feelings when they came up, to stay with the bodily feelings, to kind of allow himself to feel that kind of dislike and how it, came as contraction or tension in the body, to feel that emotion of anger or frustration, or feel the wanting. Notice the thoughts, the judging thoughts towards the teacher, judging thoughts towards the student, judging thoughts towards himself, and the beliefs, that kind of underpin that, the belief, oh, I'm better than them, I'm good, or the belief in, the teacher doesn't, isn't being a skillful teacher, or whatever it might be. And inviting him to just work with his experience as we do in the practice, just letting it all come and go, not following the thoughts wherever they go, letting them go. And to practice compassion for himself, practice compassion and loving kindness for the teacher, for the fellow student. And as he practiced being with the difficult feelings and seeing ultimately the feelings, if they weren't clung to, or if he didn't try and push them away, then they were actually empty. They were kind of almost like bubbles. They would come along and they would go. If he could have the awareness to just not get hooked on them, not get caught up in, the teacher's stupid, or this other person's a worthless artist, or I'm getting caught up in this again, and I'm a worthless practitioner, or whatever the thing is, rather than getting caught up in that, in aversion or clinging, to be able to just watch it all. And then it does become like they all become like bubbles. The feelings come along, they bubble up, they pass. The thoughts come along, they bubble up, they pass. The emotions come along, the beliefs, they're all come and go. And he was able to work with these difficult feelings and emotions and sensations. He saw how he was creating his own suffering, that by how he was thinking and believing and reacting, how he was meeting those moments when he was caught up, that he was producing his own suffering, that his clinging was leading to a sense of a self, a solidification of a self that needed to be protected and defended. And that if he did less of that, then there was less of a self and there was less suffering. And he was able, through over a period of months and in fact going into years, was able to work with these, habits of mind, if you like. They'd been going on a long time. They didn't just bubble up in an art class. Obviously there'd been a lot of history, of needing praise or needing recognition and comparing himself to others that had built up through life. So it was working with all of that, not just, what was happening in those few moments or few hours in class. But he was able to work in practice and talk about his experience. He'd go in and experience doing, being able to let go somewhat in the classes, but still feeling himself caught, but finding some freedom. It's like that quote from Ajahn Chah that I share quite frequently, of letting go a little and experiencing a little freedom and peace, letting go a lot and experiencing a lot of peace, freedom, well-being, and letting go completely and experiencing complete freedom. And our struggle with the world will be at an end. That he was able to, at times, experience a little freedom, and at other times experience a lot of freedom, of kind of like a lot of letting go. And maybe it would come back later, but through the practice, he was able to really do a good job of untangling himself from this particular form of dukkha. I wouldn't say he'd done it completely, he'd let go completely, but he'd found a good deal of freedom through the practice. And I use him as an example because he was so honest and so willing kind of to talk through all of the different manifestations of it without being kind of ashamed or embarrassed. And he was willing to say that. And so it was possible to kind of see almost moment to moment him making the changes and seeing what was coming up. So just the kind of the big picture of all of this is to say, the more we cling to anything, the more we build up and reinforce a sense of a separate self. So the more there's this clinging, the more the mind hooks on to greed, hatred, and delusion, either any of those, wanting, pushing away, escaping. The more we do any of that, the more we create a sense of a separate self, a self that needs to be protected and defended and nurtured and fed, in a way, in a really needy kind of way. Not that it's, it can be that and healthy to have a good sense of self, who we are and how we move through the world. That can be completely unproblematical. But it's when we have this sense of it's really a false sense of self that we construct out of the clinging itself. That's where the suffering is. So the more we cling, the more we build up and reinforce this sense of a separate self that needs to be protected. And the more we suffer, clinging, self-suffering, clinging, self-suffering. And we're really creating or fabricating our own suffering. We're really creating our suffering. It's not necessary that the suffering exist. Malcolm could have, with enough practice and enough training, could have just saw, the teacher praising the other student, and he might have said to himself, I don't really think that's so good, but okay, that's his or her opinion. Okay. And when passing by, okay, nothing to say about mine. Okay, there's no, you know, so could easily be, there's nothing inherent in what happened that led to suffering. That's really what I'm wanting to say. There's nothing inherent in any of that that causes suffering. The suffering had to be constructed. It had to be created. It had to be fabricated. And it was fabricated and created by the clinging, by the wanting something and the wanting to push away something else. You know, it could take different forms, but as the Buddha talks about it, it basically takes the forms of greed, hatred, and delusion. In those kind of the blanket, the big picture terms, the kind of the pulling towards us, the pushing away, and the kind of spacing out or escaping from. So we can look at this process of creating or fabricating suffering, that we create it ourselves. You know, we might see somebody doing something harmful, you know, and we might be very angry and judgmental about that, but we create our own suffering around it. Hopefully we can do something about a situation that is harmful. So it's not about just letting things go by. But if we're clinging to anything, we suffer. So we always have this capacity to untangle ourselves from suffering. So whenever there's suffering, whenever we experience suffering, we can look to see, where is the clinging? Where is the clinging that has led to the creation of this suffering? What am I holding on to? And with training and with practice, we'll be able to find the clinging. We'll be able to see, because it's not always obvious and easy. Sometimes we have to really work with it. We're angry or annoyed about something, or we're frustrated. We may not quite know, what is it? What am I triggered by right now? What am I holding on to? But if we pay attention, we can see, okay, there's suffering. There's something I'm in conflict with here, something I'm resisting here, something I'm holding on to here. Can I just see that? May take a while, may take some time to open to it. The kind of kindness is a big part of doing it, allowing space for things to open up around the difficulty, and then maybe we can see it more clearly. So suffering, whenever there's suffering, we can kind of trace our steps back to the clinging that gives rise to the suffering. And we can look also at how we build a sense of a separate self from the clinging, from our unwise relationship to our experience. And we can take any of these. We can take the clinging, the self, and the suffering, and we can look at it through that particular lens. So we can look at, whenever we experience a sense of self that needs to be protected or defended, then we can then say, okay, what is the clinging that's giving rise to this self? You know, the sense of a me, you know, in conflict with an other. Whenever that's there, they say, okay, what is the clinging that's giving rise to this sense of a separate self? And we'll also be able to see the suffering that comes with this creation of the solid separate I, you know, the self that we're holding on to. We'll find the suffering. So we can take any of these lenses and we can find our way back to, you know, we can find our way to the suffering and to the way out of the suffering. We can look at, where is the suffering? Where am I experiencing unsatisfactoriness? Things not being as they should be. What am I clinging to that's giving rise to this suffering? You know, where's the clinging or the aversion or the delusion that's leading me to suffering? And I can look at, you know, where I've created a sense of a separate self, and I can look for the clinging, and I can look for the suffering that ensues from that. So all of this to invite us to kind of take, if this is a helpful way, or these are helpful ways of seeing, take this triad of clinging, self, and suffering, and kind of use this, if it's helpful, as a lens or as lenses to look at your own experience in this period. You know, think about this, you know, these days, these weeks. You know, where is the shoe pinching for you? You know, where are you experiencing some tightness, some contractions, some suffering, some things being not the way we want them to be? So explore the suffering and look at, what am I holding on to? What am I clinging to? You know, where am I in some way at war with my experience here that's giving rise to this suffering and giving rise to this sense of a separate self? So whenever we find any of this, either of these or one of these, this triad, we can kind of follow the string back to how we find freedom. Because whenever we find suffering, we can find our way to the clinging that gives rise to self and suffering. And we can say, okay, now that I see what I'm holding on to, can I let go of this? Can I let go a little? Can I make some space around this? Can I bring compassion to myself so that I can hold this experience, so that I can let go a little bit more? So when we do that, we begin to fabricate, to create suffering less and less. I mean, we create less suffering. More and more, we create less suffering. We create, by letting go, we're creating less suffering, letting go of the suffering, letting go. And in this way, we're creating suffering less and less. We're fabricating self and suffering less and less. So what is it for you in these times? You know, where would be the wise place or places to pay attention that would allow you to live with greater ease, with greater well-being, with greater freedom in these times, in the midst of the storm, because we are in the middle of a storm. You know, it's like there's this hurricane going on around us, people getting caught up, in lots of different kinds of suffering. And we don't need to, or at least we can be caught up much, much less than we are. If we can use these lenses, basically the lenses of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths of how do we create suffering by clinging, and how do we let go by seeing clearly and cultivating awareness and kindness and compassion. So I'll just put that out and share that as some initial reflections for today. Invite us to come into a meditation. Where you might just take some moments to settle and relax. Just dropping down out of the thinking mode, out of the head down into the body. If you're comfortable, you could close your eyes, let the attention come inward. Feeling your body where you are, feeling the contact with the surface beneath you. Just connecting with your breathing. Breathing in, breathing out. And you might invite the breath to deepen. taking some longer, deeper breaths can help us relax and arrive. Nice full deep in-breath, filling the chest, filling the lungs. Relaxing, letting go, releasing on the out-breath. As you breathe in, just feeling the energy come into the body. And as you breathe out, relaxing, releasing, letting go of anything you might be holding, any tensions, just breathe it out. In breath and out breath. And if it's helpful to you, you might bring a smile to your face. Another way of relaxing the body and the mind. You could think of a loved one or a dear friend, somebody who easily makes you feel happy. Just inviting the eyes and the mouth into the expression of a smile. Smile, the breath. If it's helpful, you could put a hand on your heart or on your belly, connecting with this life, connecting with this, the suffering, the difficulties, the challenges, anything that might be difficult to work with, to be with, to hold that with kindness. And you might reflect on some things in your life that you're grateful for, you feel thankful for. We spend so much time thinking about what's wrong or what we lack. Just shifting inward, bringing awareness to what we have can warm the heart, can help us step out of suffering, difficulty. Just holding your experience right now with kindness and with acceptance. Just letting the breath come back to its natural rhythm and just opening to whatever is present for you right now, whatever bodily feelings you're aware of. Can you hold those with kindness? Any emotion or mind state that's here, heaviness, tiredness, peace, calm, joy, sadness. Whatever's here, see if you can make space for it. Let the feelings come and go. Let the sensations come and go. Whatever thoughts are present. Mind may be quite busy, or it might be calm and relaxed. However it is, make space for what's here. Meet it with kindness. Remembering the words from Martha Postlethwaite, her poem Clearing. Do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open, cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world so worthy of rescue. So stepping out of the busyness, the dense forest, creating a space, a clearing, and opening to whatever is present, whatever's arising in the body, the heart, the mind. And out of that clarity, the stillness, the silence can come wisdom, come insight that we go back into the world with. This world so worthy of rescue. The intention of holding whatever is present with acceptance, with kindness. Whatever's here. Using the breath as a focus or as an anchor, if that's helpful to you. Still with the sensations of breathing in and breathing out. And letting the breath be a home base that we come back to when the mind goes off. So no problem when the mind moves into thought. But when it does, if we can kindly and gently come back to the breath, come back to the body, come back to this moment. Don't get lost so much in the stories, following the thoughts down the alleyways. But just notice, we've probably had the thought many times before, and choosing to come back to the body and the breath in this moment as a path to well-being, to greater freedom. Not making thoughts bad or wrong, but just choosing not to follow them wherever they go. Remembering the words from Thich Nhat Hanh about refugees trying to escape from Vietnam. He said, when the crowded refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person stayed calm, it was enough. It showed the way for everyone to survive. So we could think of ourselves, or as we could aspire to being that voice, that presence of peace in the midst of the turbulence, the storms, the divisions. Can we be that voice of kindness, that voice of equanimity? And not that we're likely to be perfect all the time, or even that perfection be the goal, but just that be our intention, that we manifest in our life, that we have the intention of bringing kindness into the world, compassion, the well-being of all. And that we train the mind, we cultivate this practice, this bodhisattva practice, this seeing our own good and the good of all, and vice versa, that we care about the well-being of all beings everywhere. So take your time coming back into the group, opening your eyes. I'm going to invite Emily we're going to have a short meditation to finish, but sorry I left it so late today, Emily, but let's have some time to come into the body. Thank you.
Just take a moment to find your feet and stretch whatever needs to be stretched. And then raise your arms up and reach up. And there, cultivate the energy of the sky and the sun. And bring that energy down to your heart. And then cultivate the energy of all of us together and bring that to your heart. And then cultivate the energy of the earth, that which nourishes us, and bring that to your heart. Let's start by raising our arms again, grasping the right wrist in the left hand. Breathe in and exhale towards the left, drawing the right side of your body over. And come up. Grasp the left wrist and tilt towards the right. And come up. Float those arms down and just swing for a moment, feeling the freedom within your body. And then take a moment to come to neutral and grasp your hands at the behind your back. Inhaling deeply, lift your head and your chest. Exhale, lengthen your arms and draw your shoulder blades together. Gentle here, if you're, and release. One more time. Inhale, lift up, tilt your head up, and exhale, lengthen. Bring your hands back to your hips. Shake it out. Last time is a forward bend. Place your hands above your knees. Take a deep inhale in. Exhale, lower, allowing gravity to pull you down. Coming down as far as is comfortable for you. Noticing your feet, the solidity of your feet as they support you. Breathing in and out. And then place your hands above your knees again and roll up. Vertebrae by vertebrae, bring your hands to heart center and release out to the sky, out to the community and the earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Lovely. So coming back, thank you. Needed that. Coming back. Find a comfortable, relaxed posture. We'll just finish with a short, loving kindness practice. Just taking a breath, a deeper breath or two, and settling into being here. Maybe putting your hand on your heart or your belly if that's helpful. Just connecting with yourself, your life, caring about this life. any suffering you're experiencing. And as you breathe in, you might breathe in a wish of kindness to yourself. May I be filled with happiness. May I be safe and free from harm. May I be peaceful. Just wishing for yourself that you have a sense of peace and ease in your life. May I be peaceful. May I live with ease and with kindness. May I live with ease and with kindness. Just recognizing that you and probably all of us are experiencing some difficulties, some challenges in these times. Just to meet what you're experiencing, what you're going through with a quality of kindness, with an attitude of kindness and care. Holding yourself with loving kindness. May I be held in loving kindness, filled with loving kindness. And feel yourself here, held in a field of kindness. This field, held in community. Feel yourself connected here with everyone else. You might send out a wish of loving kindness to everyone here on our class today. May you be filled with happiness. To the whole, everybody together or individual people who come to mind. Just wishing everyone well. May you be safe and free from harm. May you be peaceful. May you live with ease and with kindness. Ease and kindness. You might just let these wishes go outward, out into the world, perhaps towards those who are experiencing difficulties or pain or suffering right now. Just wherever your heart, your imagination, your mind take you right now. Just letting these wishes of loving kindness, of caring, of compassion go outward to wherever you feel they're most needed. May you be happy, filled with happiness. May you be safe and free from harm. May you be peaceful. May you live with ease and with kindness. Holding our world and all the beings in our world, in our heart, with kindness, with compassion, with care. May the choices that we make individually and collectively in the weeks ahead, may they come from an open-hearted place, caring and compassionate place. And may they have the intention of building a more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. And to use Charles Eisenstein's name of his book, a more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. May our words, our actions, our thoughts, our work lead to a more caring and compassionate world. Rilke's poem, I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, around the primordial tower. I've been circling for thousands of years, and still I don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? So coming back, we just finished with some short announcements. I'll just share. I know a number of you are going to be coming along at 1 o'clock today, where we'll be writing letters to irregular voters to encourage them to vote, saying why voting is important to us. We'll be doing that from 1 to 3. But for that, we need to have our letters printed out and ready to go, and just need to write our personal messages on that. But hopefully we'll get quite a few messages out to people and be part of this process of hopefully, we hope, creating a more caring and compassionate society and world. So one thing I will say, just mention, as pretty much all of you know, or most of you know, maybe a few people are new, but there's no charge for the class, but you're invited, if you're able and inclined, to make a donation that helps me as a teacher to continue to teach. And I'm very, very grateful for your support.